Welcome to I Bought a Tax Practice, previously recorded on September 27th, 2019. Your host is John Sheeley, with this week's guests, Fred Stein and Debbie Snelling. No continuing education is available for this recording. You can download the material referenced in today's broadcast at the link shown on your screen. This link also appears in the first comment of the comments section in the YouTube replay. This broadcast is not a substitute for legal advice. The opinions expressed here are those of the speaker making them. Sample legal documents provided are for reference only and should not be used without consultation with an attorney in possession of all relevant facts of your situation. This rebroadcast is brought to you in part by our friends at Tax Help Software. Tax Help Software saves you time by downloading and examining IRS transcripts in bulk. Detect IRS notices and examinations up to 6 months in advance with Tax Help software. Save 10% with discount code MD1099. This rebroadcast is also brought to you in part by Call NQ. Save time by cutting your IRS hold time to 3 minutes or less. Sign up for a 200-minute trial for $19.97 using the link on this screen and discount code JSH. Tax Practice Pro is a continuing education provider for enrolled agents, certified public accountants, attorneys, PTIN holders, and now certified financial planner professionals. View a list of our current live and online programs at www.taxpracticepro.com. Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. Welcome to Tax Practice Pro's podcast. Today's discussion is on I Bought a Tax Practice. We're going to speak with Fred Stein from various locations on the East and West Coast. He doesn't have a home anymore. And Debbie Snelling, who's in North Georgia. Both of them acquired practices and clients in the last tax season. And I think this is a fun conversation because as the Tax Cut and Job Act and other things are affecting how we practice and what our incomes look like, this is something that most of us should explore. And I guess I heard a disturbing fact. The average age of an NATP member nationally is 61 right now. So either combination, right? Younger folks don't join some of these member organizations, and we are aging as a group. So very interesting. Fred, tell us a little bit about who and what. You're a CPA from?
From New York. I am also an enrolled agent. I did pass that this past year to make all the different state stuff a lot easier than getting reciprocity. I am kind of sort of back and forth between the coasts. I'm not totally homeless. I do find a place to sleep under a cardboard box every once in a while. And we've been putting in a plan to try to buy a new practice every single year for the next bunch of years to basically fund my retirement.
And you attended the greatest school in the Northeast.
I heard it has a great library. I've never seen it, but it's amazing.
Penfield Library with a 24-hour room.
Yes.
Debbie? Hey, Debbie, you with us?
Yep, that's brilliant. So a little bit about me. I was the tax director of a publicly traded company and kind of aged out of corporate. I was told in my mid-40s by a peer that we were soon going to not be able to get another job, so we better land the job that we were going to keep forever. And I laughed at her, but she was sure right. I aged out. So I bought a small practice and in 2013. And since then, I've bought a total of 4 practices, 3 great deals, 1 not so good deal. And, kind of trying to keep my thing going. We also opened an office down in Tampa that we talked about yesterday. So I've got the 4 that I bought and then the 1 that I opened.
Oh. So back in the day, I owned H&R Block offices. If you go way back, I started with 1, I grew to 5. It included buying other people's offices, opening an empty office, going to a new town. I also purchased an independent practice that we merged in, which had lots of bumps to it. I personally think that the best investment any of us can make in growing our business is the purchase of another practice or a group of clients at the right price, because that money you spend is going to return a like kind of money every year into the foreseeable future, as opposed to advertising and other marketing that's kind of throwing mud at the wall. What do you think, Fred?
I totally agree with that, because what you do is you're buying a base of clients. And as we discussed yesterday, it's sort of like buying a home, as it's going to increase in value each and every year as long as you do the proper work with the clients you have.
Agreed. Debbie?
And then also from my perspective, I'm delighted that I'm buying a trained, qualified staff. It's much harder for me to find qualified employees than it is for me to find good clients.
Yeah, we had talked about that too, back to Fred's analogy about the house. You also have a place to live, and what I mean by that is a lot of people start out a practice, they get 50, 100 clients, they have a day job, they work from home, they work a day job in another practice while they build theirs. I bought a practice. I took in, I think, $60,000 my first year in 1991, but I was able to make an existence out of that, pay some rent, live on my own, and I think that adds credibility too. I was there every day, even in the off season. You could build. But how do you fund something like this? I mean, I know they're beating a path to your door to fund it, right? I mean, I watch all those no money down real estate commercials, and I know that folks are willing to hold the note for me, right, to help me get rich. What are you finding, Fred, when you're buying practices? Where's money coming from?
It all depends on the seller and the seller situation at the time. In many cases, if the seller is one of those sellers that cares about their clients and where they want to go, and they've already taken care of their retirement, so to say, they're much more apt to hold a note and work with you. And in many cases, even stay on during the transition period, where when they do that, they're more likely to take less money up front because they're there and watching over the investment that they've sold.
So
Yeah,
that's something you say to people. Hey, by the way, how's the money going to work?
Well, we have a set deal that we do. We usually give between 5 and 10% down of what the expected full sales price is. And then we go with the premise of we're going to pay them 25% a year every year for 4 years. And so, of course, there's retainage involved with all of that. But we feel that's a very fair deal, and we've had a number of them already accepted. One person wanted all their money up front, and of course, that's a deal that we weren't willing to do.
Debbie, what are you seeing? You're buying.
I did some owner fi. One of the practices that I bought, he financed. I had to give him about 100K up front, which I did by pulling out of a rental property that I own. And then he's financed the balance and still works with me. I've been fortunate that 3 of my sellers have continued to work with me, 3 out of 4, after they sold the practice to me, both because, as Fred mentioned, they cared about their clients, but also because we had good working relationships. So it's a nice, even small practitioners in particular, we're part of their retirement plan. I'm part of their cash stream. So even for the guy who required 100K up front, I pay him $15,000 a year as a balloon for 3 years, and I'm a real nice supplement to his other retirement income.
I agree that selling your practice is probably a leg, a third or a fourth of what someone's retirement package looks like. In fact, I think they kind of count on the ability to exit profitably. And I think that's going to start to be a problem as we're going to talk a little bit about some of the returns. So, and I agree. I think a full pay is probably a bad deal, Fred. I won't say details here because you never want to reveal who somebody is, but we talk to a lot of people about various, they want advice or ideas. And I've encountered a couple of people, 2 that I can think of immediately, who got royally hurt by the seller, who started to compete right away. And in one case, they'd gotten all the money. And I don't know how you refinance your house, you pay them, and then they tell you part of the business doesn't go with it, or, oh, I'm moving one town over and competing. So you want to have a strong legal agreement in writing, I guess. Debbie, where do you start on valuation on a practice?
We generally start at, it's going to be around somewhere 1 times gross revenue. So I think we've talked about the range of 0.75 to 1.25, and with brokers up to 1.4. So depending upon the quality of the client, the market that they're in, what else you're buying besides just the client list. So I'm typically often also buying all of the contents of the office. So everything you see in this office, none of it belonged to me. People keep saying, "Oh, you like owls." No, I don't. The person who worked here before me did. So,
I think you're allowed to put things you don't like in a box.
but then I'd have to replace them. It's
And Fred, Debbie hit on it. The old value, right? The old rule of thumb, if you will, was 0.75 to 1.25, with most practices probably being worth 1 times revenue, as you said, with a retainage. But we've got two things going on. One is the Tax Cut and Job Act kind of took our homeowner returns, if you will, and we're doing less work, which may impact the price. It was a $200 return this year, but it might be less over the next 3 to 4 years, at least until 2025. We also have the issue of the age, just like our profession is aging. More and maybe you don't see this. I see more and more folks trying to DIY or do it themselves. The software is getting better, and they also don't have that stigma of I got an IRS letter. But Fred, what are you seeing and how are you valuing? Are you taking this into account?
We definitely are. In the handout that you have on the screen, the client list for sale individuals, that's the information that we ask for when we buy a practice. I want to know the age of the individuals. I want to know how long they've been with that practice, and I want to know what different types of schedules are included in that practice, because we're going to stratify that information. And if the bulk of your clients are 70 and older, it's not a practice worth buying unless you do a lot of estate returns, and those are one and dones. So you're going to do that lower. If you have people that are in their 40s and their businesses are growing, that might be a more valuable business because you're going to see that growing as well. When we do our deals, the equipment and furniture and everything that comes with the office, which is the same way in my Roseville office, I just kept everything the same, and will also be in the Citrus Heights office. Just I'm going to walk in and it's all decorated. We buy that stuff separately though. So here's the price for the items we're buying. Here's the practice price. And unless the bottom line is really good, I don't see many going for more than 1 times value.
I agree with a downward adjustment based on age and return type. I'm scared in 3 to 4 years, if they don't change the Tax Cut and Job Act when the provisions expire, how many more of these people are going to go be more comfortable doing TurboTax returns or whatever product? I shouldn't be so generic. How about you both keep talking about retainage, retention? So when I sell a practice, I might have a target price, but we're probably not settling on the price at contract time. But what are we doing, Debbie? Looking down the road, kicking the can down the road a bit to do what?
So you kick the can down the road a bit to have a purchase price adjustment, and it's typically just a downward adjustment, though it could be upward. Although I like the idea of paying them a referral fee if they bring you in new clients. Pardon me?
Does that make you Debbie Downer?
Debbie Downer indeed. As opposed to many of the other Debbie expressions that could go out. But yeah, so we look for a retention, and we reduce the purchase price somewhere between 1.5 to 3 years, depending upon how long we think it's worthy in the practice. Younger clients will tend to leave you faster than older clients.
That's funny. I used to think you adjusted the first year, right? You go through season 1, and then May 1st, you look at the retention. And for example, you always ask the seller, so how's your retention been? Oh, none of my clients leave unless they die, and I'm so good when they die, I get the estate return. Okay, great. So your retention is 100%. They just walked into that one. And then in May 1st, if they only got 95% of the clients came back, you would look to adjust downward, as you said, by 5% of the purchase price. But you're not looking at just 1 year, right? Either one of you. What were you saying, Fred? You said 18 months, 2 years, Debbie, Fred?
Okay. Well, we do it over 3 or 4 years. That's always negotiable. And the first year is always the lowest percentage because nobody leaves the first year. The people that leave the first year are those people that were happy with their previous preparer, but they've got a friend or a buddy or somebody else, and the only reason they don't leave is because they're loyal to this guy. They use the sale as an excuse to jump next door to their buddy Tim, who does tax returns. So you tend to keep most of the people the first year because they want to meet you. They don't know you, they're going to meet you, and they're either going to like you or not. So year 2 is where we put the focus on the retainage. So we may, if we're doing a 3-year retainage thing, we're going to do 20, 40, and 40 for the retainage for calculating the final cost. Payout may not be that. Payout may be 25, 25, 25, and 25. So that's all different. That's if we have a set price. Sometimes when we structure the deals is we simply pay 25% of the revenue collected for that year. And so if the cost of that, if let's say the practice was $200,000 they took in, and now 10% leave, but those other 90% pay me $220,000, I'm going to pay based on the $220,000 and not on the 180 that it would be if we calculated based on the prior year's cost.
And I have to say, I really like that model that Fred came up with, where you pay a percentage based upon revenues collected. The one thing I don't like about it is where I'm growing a business much faster than my predecessor, than the seller, then I'm paying him for my efforts.
New clients don't count.
Yeah, new clients don't count, only his clients.
Mm-hmm.
That would be interesting though too, if all of a sudden Mr. Smith has a trust, a corporation, or kids that need tax returns. Does that relationship, that would be something to negotiate, is that considered part of what you bought, or is that a new client from your good work, or something in between?
If it was a child that was already a client and now they're going from college and they just opened their own business, I'm going to gift that to the seller because I believe that's part of what I bought.
Well, I'm thinking 14 and 15-year-old children that start to go to work and become a paying you some level of fee. That is that a new client? Is that a client you generated? I don't have an answer for you, and it's probably not a lot of money to worry about it, but. So we were talking about the differences between full practice and partial practices. Now, Debbie, your 4 acquisitions were all full practices?
3 were full practices. 1 was just the tax side of the business.
Okay.
So I prefer to buy full practices.
Right.
I don't like buying partials because of what you were talking about earlier. Then your client or your seller is going out to compete against you, or he's cherry picking clients and selling you the ones that aren't the profitable ones.
So when you buy, you're unique. You've got 4 locations across northern Georgia, and then the one down in Tampa.
Correct.
Right. So but we were talking the other day. You're what, 200 miles from, not including Tampa, to go across Georgia from location to location?
Yeah, it's a long way.
Yeah, no. So a couple of interesting thoughts. So the first thing is, by buying it, you're buying overhead.
I'm buying overhead.
So the business better cover its own costs. You're not merging. I think we all have this dream. We buy the guy across the street who maybe has a better office. We move out of our office, move into his office, and take all our clients with us. Not a lot of additional overhead, and a big piece drops to the bottom line. That's not what you're doing. So you're putting a big emphasis on the P&L for that business that you're buying.
I'm putting the emphasis on the P&L. I'm doing cash flow projections. I always do a 5-year projection, and I budget for a retention of about 90%, sometimes 85%, depending upon the practice. And then I assume that, again, although I believe in marketing, I think more than perhaps you guys do, my marketing efforts, SEM in particular, is very effective for us. So I budget for growth every year.
What's SEM?
Search engine marketing.
Oh,
Google AdWords.
SEO, search engine optimization. All right, got it.
It's different. Yeah, search engine optimization is driving people to your website. SEM is as AdWords and making clickbait.
Got it. All right. I always heard that was a long time to go broke.
It can,
Get lit up.
it's done well, you know. We did it one year with a gigantic television station, and our phones rang off the hook, but in the wrong market. So we had thousands and thousands of phone calls, but not in places where we had offices.
Oh, ouch. All right, that's a story for another webinar.
That's another day.
Fred, you've had a couple of acquisitions of partial practices of somebody peeling off their C&D clients or getting ready to semi-retire. I know you did one just now. Have you done any in the past?
No, the one I did now was the first one,
Okay.
and it depended, and that was sort of like buying the home because I was relocating out here to California. So I just wanted something that's going to replace my salary that were taken out of the New York office, and it worked well. And then, of course, we acquired the two more this year. Um, the thing with the partial one, and the one partial one of mine is he moved from California to Texas. So he did not move to the next town over. His daughter-in-law stayed and worked with me as my receptionist until she moved to Arizona. So he was taking the business clients. So he left me all the personal clients other than personal clients of the businesses he did. And then he left me the businesses that he knew couldn't handle the long distance relationship. So it worked out well, and we actually still work in conjunction with each other back and forth with things, and I fully expect him to sell me the rest of his stuff when he gets closer to 70 in a few years.
Nice. Now, we talk, so that's interesting, right? Two different takes on a partial practice. I know a couple of other people who have successfully bought partial practices in a town where the other practitioner continues to practice. And I think that's really interesting. And I think the protection has to come down to your agreement. Now, we talked that non-compete agreements really aren't as enforceable as everyone would like. Most states are a right to work state, and this isn't a legal program, obviously, but in most states, you can't ban someone from an entire industry. So they'll be there, they'll compete. The one thing that does hold up is Fred hit on this when we did, by the way, when we keep talking about the other day, we do a dry run of this to make sure that we all have technology that works and we have enough to say. So Fred had said that, that hit it correctly, which is that you have a non-solicitation agreement, which says, I don't care what happens in this world, you're not going to ask the prior clients to do the return, and you're not going to do them. There's no situation where you do the returns you sold to me where you can do them. Fred, you're finding that easy to get into an agreement?
It is, and I think it's very enforceable as well. And if you go back to the way that I like to buy the practices, where we're just paying 25% a year of what we collect, if they come and leave, well, we've paid for what we've got. If they go, we're not paying anymore. It's not part of that, retainage aspect.
I like it. Debbie, what do you think?
It's part of the brilliance of the idea.
Oh, I mean, you're not hit. Don't call Fred brilliant, but
Oh, I call this idea brilliant. That's very different.
God,
I'm
so,
sure he stole it from someone.
so without segueing into the keeping these folks on as employees, because we're going to get to that in a minute. Are you finding that you can get people to sign a non-compete or an anti-solicitation? Are you getting a lot of pushback?
So yeah, I've only had one person who pushed back on the non-compete, and I basically just said either you're willing to sign it or I'm willing to walk away. But I like the non-solicitation idea much better than the non-compete. It's much more enforceable, I think, legally, although I'm not a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I love the idea of the non-solicitation, and I don't have any problem with people. They're typically getting out for a reason. Nowadays, a lot of people are getting out of the business because the penalties are so high. Crazy high.
Crazy high, and if you own the business, they're double because you failed to. It's another class to do too, right? $530 for not your employee didn't do due diligence. $530 on you for your failure to supervise, and it's 3 or 4 credits, and it stacks. It's amazing. So let's talk about due diligence for a minute. What kind of what do you want to look at now, Fred? I saw. By the way, there's 5 documents that are available in the download section. If you click on your tab, you'll see down towards the bottom, it says handouts. If you can't get any of the handouts, email me offline, John at Tax Practice Pro. Happy to send it along to you. There'll also be a Dropbox for it on the replay. If you can't get a hold of me, go to the YouTube page, the YouTube channel for Tax Practice Pro, and you'll be able to download the documents there. Fred, what are you looking at for due diligence? What are you starting with? I saw your sheets. How about the work that was done, right? So we're finding out who the clients are, what they paid, how old they are, what kind of return they are. But then after that, what about the work? I know you'll find this hard to believe. There are people out there that don't do the nice, neat work that we do.
They do not. And what we want to do once we get to the stage where we are actually very serious about looking and buying, then we want to sample some of their returns. We also want to understand their processes for how they do the returns, whether they're the sit there and get them done while they wait, or they get how the returns come in and then go out. That was my biggest problem in my Roseville location, was everybody was used to this gentleman taking 2 hours and sit down with them and do the return while they were there. And we absolutely do not do that for anything, harder than a W-2 and mortgage interest and property taxes. So we want to do that, and we also want to look at a sampling of their returns, some of their easy returns, some of their harder returns, their pricier returns.
Debbie, what are you doing for some of your due diligence?
We're doing that. We're looking at financial statements. We're comparing financial statements to tax returns. And then we're also individually looking at, especially if you're buying a partial practice, we're looking at what's the billings for the clients that you're actually acquiring.
You're comparing to the owner's records when you say the tax return, right? So I tell you that I've got $1 million in revenue. You're looking at my tax return to make sure I really have $1 million in revenue.
I'm at least looking to see that you were willing to declare under penalty of perjury that you did.
And to add to that, I'm also looking for the 4506T because I want access to that transcript that was actually filed.
Yep. Or a power of attorney too, and pull that transcript.
Yes.
At least get a look at some of the numbers.
Because tax people wouldn't lie.
Well, they wouldn't lie to the IRS. They might lie to you. I like in looking at returns. I like pulling what the seller tells me are his 10 most complex and his 10 most expensive, and then I like Fred's idea of getting a census of all the names, and then I would do some sort of randomization and pull 10 random off that list, and let's take a look at everything and see what they look like. I'm also concerned with documentation. A friend of mine and Fred's bought a practice this year, didn't do some of the due diligence on the credits, and there's two problems. One, there's a whole bunch of missing documentation, including forms 8332, but when you try to clean it up the second year, what happens, Fred? They all what?
That's not how it was done last year.
Right, they run, right.
Yeah.
My guys never asked me for that. Why are you?
Right.
Are you telling me he wasn't any good?
I'm concerned that I've bought a $200,000 practice that becomes $150,000, and I get bad mouthed, and maybe I get sued because the seller says, well, that's your fault for thinking you're the IRS. And it can be, when you're buying, it's one thing to buy from someone you know or someone you worked for. It's another thing maybe to buy from a stranger. Have either of you encountered a bad preparer or a bad actor seller?
Yes.
Okay.
That was my bad deal from a couple of years ago.
Okay. They were doing criminal stuff, or they were a criminal to you?
Not they dealt in bad faith with me. Some of the things that he said, how he handled certain of his transactions for clients, specifically in a community property state, I would never tell a client to do, but he kind of used that as a tax planning strategy for that married couple who doesn't live together or kind of filing separate.
Okay, and no documentation, right? We just do it wrong here.
Yes.
All right, Debbie. I mean, you've had. I won't ask you the return count, but it's got to be in the 10,000? I mean, high numbers. What have you encountered anything significant?
Well, for me, I've been fortunate. The only bad practice that I bought was bookkeeping, and so we have gotten rid of, or they got rid of us, a lot of those bookkeeping clients. They didn't like being told to do things properly. Same thing. But a friend of mine recently bought a practice nearby me where there was a gross misrepresentation of the revenue and the quality of the client. And then she also found out that the clients hadn't been served well for the last year and a half. So they were all on the cusp of walking. And so she had to go back in and establish that, you know, the seller wasn't good to you, but I'm going to be good to you, and I'm competent, I'm qualified. So she's lost a good number of clients and raised the fees on the ones that are remaining.
She almost could have walked across the street and opened a business on her own, right? And said, "Hi, come
Yeah,
here, we're nice." Wow.
yeah.
So how about management after you buy it? Now, Debbie, I know that you like to retain the seller,
I
right?
do.
What does that look like?
I've been fortunate that the sellers that I've bought from have been competent and not really willing to retire, not really ready to retire. So they wanted to work through tax season, which helps with the transition. So it helped to have familiar faces. That's why I like to keep staff. The client comes in, they're familiar faces. And so it helps with the transition, and it helps you to lose fewer clients. So I prefer it. It also makes them less willing to go try to compete with you because they've been sitting inside your four walls.
These also, Debbie, are not one-person practices you're buying, right? You're buying a 2, 3, 4 preparer business and integrating it.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's been some of all of it actually. I had one of the practices was a guy who brought in seasonal people and had a part-time bookkeeper.
Okay.
So
But again, you're not buying a one guy in a room and his list, right? You're buying a
correct.
more of a going concern.
Correct.
Fred,
Yeah,
how
that
about
fits better with my model.
it seems to work? Yeah. Fred, what about you? I know you're looking at every kind of deal, but do you have a preference, or how does retaining the owner look
I
like?
have, I have the same preference as Debbie. If when we look to retain the owner, we first have a very hard conversation with the owner because they've owned it. And the biggest problem that we found is that once upon buying and then you start changing things to the way you do things, they're not used to not being in charge anymore. And so they need to have a hard look within inside themselves to see whether they're going to be okay with that. And if they're not, then it may not be a good fit for them to stay on in that kind of a capacity. We do want them to stay on. They also have to fit the BQ family. If we don't like the person, I don't want to work with them.
I don't think you meant it that way. I don't think you meant you didn't like them. If you think that there'll be a culture clash, they might be happier elsewhere, is what you meant.
No, if I don't like them, I don't want to work with them. I meant
So basically, at a job interview, I know when I leave whether I'm getting hired or not.
But we do, because when we hire our people, we hire people that can fit the family, and they have to be intelligent, of course. And if they fit in there, we can teach them the other aspects of it. That they have to be able to get along. Not everybody likes everybody all the time, but they have to fit.
Why is Tioni muting me? Mute him now. I'm getting a message on Facebook. Oh man. Now I think Debbie, you mentioned that you had to drop a seller, right? You bought a practice, you hired the seller, and it didn't work. She didn't work out.
We actually hired her daughter, and because the quality of our standards was much higher than the mother's standards, it was very awkward and uncomfortable for the daughter to remain as an employee. Although, frankly, she's a wonderful human being, and we would have loved to retain her as an employee. It just was never going to work because, you know, there's constantly a, well, we don't do it that way anymore.
Now, Fred, she just said the same thing you did, but it came out a little nicer.
I'm up front.
So we talked about workforce in place. You know, that's one of the benefits of these businesses is you're not buying 1,000 tax returns and first saying, how am I going to make this work? But we talked to both of you kind of said the same thing, which is let's evaluate how little we can change the first year. And Debbie, what were you thinking about? You said like software, you were using 2 or 3 different softwares one year?
So yeah, and we'll wind up doing that. I would prefer to buy a practice in July or October or November, when deadlines aren't pending. But I've had 2 practices that I bought in January, and so come January, you can't ask a staff to make a lot of changes to software. It's already tax season; they're already about to be deluged. And if you want to run them off, then say, hey, we're doing everything different. Here's new software. You've got 6 days to learn it, and welcome aboard. So we've used last year we used Pro Series for a season, and then in May, June switched them over to using Drake, which we use at the other offices. So, but we're already asking them to make a lot of changes. They already have a different boss. They already have to use practice management software. We're already asking them to move to a paperless environment instead of pulling hard copies out of a file and working with pieces of paper. So we're making a lot of changes already, and one of the things that we think helps them to stay is to smooth in the having to learn new tax software. It
Fred,
puts a lot of extra burden on me and my reviewers.
right. Oh, and we talked about that too, where the reviewer isn't necessarily even in their location, right? You're leveraging your workforce.
Yeah, my reviewer is rarely in the same location as the preparer.
Hey, Fred, what do you want to add to that?
This is actually where Debbie and I differ in our opinions on how to do this. We do like to follow their procedures as much as possible. Prior to buying the practice, we're not just talking to the seller. We're talking with all the employees and getting a feel for them as well. Because if the employees aren't going to be a good fit, then that's also going to put a kibosh on the sale. So we want to explain the benefits of doing it our way, that we've done it this way and it works really well. We want to take their input and get their opinion on what they like in the practice they're working now and what their feelings are as we migrate to this. In my opinion, tax programs are like driving a car. You know, it's going to get you to where you're going. We should know what the output is before we put the input in. So if my preparers know what the return is supposed to look like, they can use that program you guys call Drake, or they can use UltraTax and get to the same place. And that's where we want them to be. And I really haven't come up with much kickback from that. They've actually, a lot of times people say that they like the change, that they're welcoming that change because they like technology. Now, obviously, if we have those 61 and older employees that you were talking about in the tax practice, it's going to be different. And we have a good record of keeping our staff. And the first one I bought, I kept them for many years before they moved on to other things. The one we're doing now comes with a couple of staff, and it's more of a merger than a purchase in reality. And they're looking forward to the new ways of doing things. They were very tech friendly too. It's more an issue of seeing which apps of ours we're using, which apps of theirs we're using, and deciding which one is going to be the better fit.
So let me ask you this. This is a little off our topic list, Fred. What does it look like though if I'm going to switch your technology, right? So let's say I'm switching from Drake to UltraTax or Lacert to UltraTax, which I know you like to use. So assuming it's not December, right? It's the July, August timeframe. Are you investing? I'm not saying spending money. Are you investing in the acquired staff to come in, play with the software, work on it a little bit, maybe do some off-season returns? I don't know. What are you doing to make that work?
In the one that we're doing in Citrus Heights right now, they use Pro Connect Online, and we took over, a month or so ago. I know. I would take Drake over that, I think, and that's hard. So we are, and our stuff is on virtual workstations in our New York office, so we don't have to put them on the local workstations. And once the October 15th deadline is in, one of the things the employees over there are going to be doing are going to be recreating their returns for the past year into the UltraTax program. So they're going to get practice and working on that. If we're buying in January 1, we didn't make the deal in December. We made that deal back in September. So we've got some lag time as well in that case also, where we're gonna get some training.
That's on you, right? You're
What's
paying
that?
them. You're paying them, right, to come in and
Well, these
work.
guys are full-time there. They're not remoters.
Got it. Okay.
So even my remoters, I don't care which program you're using. And I have remoters, all over the United States, and some use Drake, some use Pro Series, some use Lacert, and they come in and it's a learning curve to learn UltraTax, but they know what the tax return is supposed to look like. And that learning curve gets better over time.
What I'm getting at is that a hidden cost? So if I'm not doing what Debbie wants to do, and even with Debbie with doing it year two, at some point, folks need to spend some time understanding the software, keying in returns. You don't probably want them doing that during busy season anyway. So, or do you? I'm asking, are you, so you have non-seasonal people, got it. They're on the clock, they're re-entering the returns, you're writing off that time, right?
Mhm.
But should all of us be factoring that into a purchase, which is, I want to get 1,000 returns from software A into software B. How am I doing it? When am I doing it? What's it going to cost me? Because I don't think people are going to volunteer to enter the returns.
It's going to take them longer to do the returns if they're not used to it. So if you're paying them hourly, that return that takes an hour, you expect it to be an hour and 15 minutes. If it's commission, then they're going to learn that quicker on their own, because the faster they do the return, then the more money they're going to make. You're going to have to do that transition no matter what. So if we wait till after tax season, we're doing it in May, June, and July anyhow. And those seasonal people aren't going to get a chance to do it. You're paying them anyhow. So I'm going to throw
One thing
the
I think to mention, here is that there is a big conversion process when you're buying somebody who's not using your software. So when you're converting 1,000 returns, the software companies all go, "Oh, it's no big deal. We have a conversion software," and it's a big deal, especially when you've got carryovers. Yeah.
1099 converting and everything, depreciation schedules, all the tax attribute carryovers. Oh, we converted from Lacert to
Right.
Pro System. It didn't even bring over the prior year's state refund.
They don't. I converted from UltraTax because my teaser price went up, and we went back to Pro Series, which we used for a number of years and we were comfortable with. So we converted from 16 to 17 to Pro Series, and then we decided that Pro Series was crap, and then we went back to UltraTax. So I converted in 17 and I converted in 18. So I'm not afraid of a conversion. It's not fun because I've got to double check all that depreciation after the remoters do it. I've got to double check all the carry forwards, but it can be done.
You misspoke there. You meant that Pro Series didn't meet your needs any longer.
Yes, that's exactly what I said.
All right, that's what I thought you said, Fred.
I didn't realize we were a family-friendly program here.
We're a plus-friendly program. So both of you, this is interesting. When I was asking for folks that wanted to come on to this program, one thing you both bring to the table is distance. Now, Debbie, in half a day, you could go from if you were farthest point A to farthest point D, you could get there. I don't know if a staffer quit, if there was some sort of urgent issue. Fred, you can't.
No, not yet. Not yet.
2 primary points, you can't, because you're 6 hours. Well, actually, Cobleskill is, you got to drive to Albany, and there aren't that many direct flights from Albany to, so you're a day. You're a day away, realistically.
Yes.
How's that working? I mean, I know you had some good staff in place.
So because it is a rural upstate community, we couldn't find somebody that we could hire full-time year-round to replace me. So we actually rented an Airbnb for the season, and I flew my remoters in. I flew Ellie in, I flew Kathy in, and they came and they met with the clients, which is kind of neat. And even if we get somebody full-time, we're going to continue that so that the clients can meet the people that are actually doing their returns. What I'd hope to do is there's a return or two, there's a practice or two I'm focusing on in Arizona, and then maybe another time zone so I can fly to one, fly to the next. And so I'm not doing a full day flight. If I got midway would be nice. 3 hours, flight to Colorado, that's easy. And then, the next week do New York and then back again.
On that link I sent you, there's got to be 20 Colorado places for sale.
I told you what Tiani said.
Huh?
I told you what Tiani said.
No.
She may not be your friend, but she will find you and cut you. We are doing 2 practices this year. Any more this year, people will be cut.
Oh, maybe you should do one on the side. And then,
No.
So, all right. So obviously, if I'm going to buy an office not in my town, my stores were 105 miles apart to get to all of them in a day. And it always seemed like wherever I was 45 minutes away from the problem. Now, technology isn't what it is today. All right. We had a fax machine and, maybe a scanner that did 10 pages a minute. But you're both telling me, though, having the right people in place and not being dependent on you, having the belief that I'm going to be in charge here or I'm going to go there isn't the way this is going to work. Part of what you're buying is you're buying people, right? What would Marcus Lemonis tell us? People, process, product, right? You need that people. You like Marcus, Debbie? You're smiling. You have no idea who he is.
I have no idea who he is, but I like people, process, product.
He's the
Yes.
prophet on CNBC. He's also the chairman of Campers World. Anyway,
I'm too cheap to pay for cable TV.
I don't have cable either. I have YouTube TV. Anyway, so one other thought. We kind of talked about the technology. We talked about office distance. There anything you guys want to plug in that we didn't catch today, or anything you want to add? Thinking about the sole practitioner that's looking to expand, right? They don't have a partner. It's just them, and they want to buy another practice, either to merge in or another location. What do either of you think?
Well, I'd like to mention that even for the solopreneur, buying a practice, I think, John, you touched on this, buying a practice out the door allows you to leave that day job. And even if you just want to be a guy sitting in the office doing tax returns yourself, buying a practice affords you the ability to do that. For Fred and I, that's just not our model. One thing that I wish I had focused on earlier was process. We actually are slowing down and not doing anything this year because I need to make sure my processes are more in place so that we can onboard employees and onboard clients more easily without me having to be there and repeat the same story 50 times. So when we found that we actually have to hand them a binder and say, this is, with tabs, this is how it's done. And that's been much more effective for us so that even though we had written procedures available online, and from my corporate background, I was used to going on to the web and looking up what the policy and procedure was. I just couldn't get my staff to do that. So I have to give them a tax handbook if I want them to look up research, and I have to give them a binder if I want them to look at my policies and procedures. So process was a thing that I wish I'd spent more time on in the beginning, and it slowed us down.
There's something to be said that technology is great, but putting something in somebody's hand. We use the tax book online because I think I can let everybody use it, and it's more affordable for me to buy. I buy I buy everything, right? So for the 2 California returns we do, I've got California, I've got depreciation. And you know what the answer I get? And remote people have access to it. You know what the answer I get sometimes is when I say I found it in the tax book? Oh, I forgot we have that. So sometimes putting things in people's hands is the way to go. Yeah. Fred, what do you got for some parting wisdom?
Okay. When we look at whether this is something we want to do, if we haven't done it before, we need to treat ourselves as if we're our clients. We need to give ourselves the advice that we would give to our clients because we don't ever take that advice. Sometimes growth is not good. If you're a solo practitioner with just a seasonal admin staff, you need to determine whether you want to have employees. And this is the struggle that so many tax practitioners deal with. Do I want to grow past those 300, 400, 500 returns that I handle myself? Because now you're migrating from doing taxes to managing people. So you got to determine whether managing people is what you want to do. Not everybody can have a Tiani. I can do what I'm doing and I make her do all the other work. So it's easy for me, but it's not easy for somebody who's going to jump in and do it themselves all the time.
It's funny you say that. So all of my acquisitions were seasonal practices, and we were already set up to be a seasonal practice. We had the spoken hub with the offices that would be open all year. That worked. So the question becomes too, which we didn't address at all, is look at where you are and what you're buying. And maybe you need to say, no, I don't want a seasonal place, or I don't want a year-round business. Very interesting. Great. So a couple of thoughts. We're going to have, thank you both, Debbie and Fred, for being online. Fred, what's your email address if people want to reach out?
Fred at bqtaxpro.com.
All right. Also, you're on Facebook, Fred Stein, and he's very good at getting back to you if you message him. Debbie, did I lose you? You look like I lost you. You need to reach Debbie. Email me or email Fred. I'm John at taxpracticepro.com. We'll put you in touch with Debbie. The replay will be available later this, probably Monday. Oh, we lost Debbie entirely. If you're interested in these programs, we are going to put together one by request for selling a practice. We'll put, oh, there's Debbie. Debbie, what's your email address?
Debbie, DEBBIE, at ngtaxsolutions.com. That's N for North, G for Georgia, ngtaxsolutions.com.
Awesome. So we are going to put together a I want to sell my practice webinar and see what we can do with that. There'll be a webinar a week, as you know. Next week, free webinar is representing the client with a revoked passport. I've got Tony Malik making his debut with us, so it should be very interesting for all of you. And thank you guys again. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Thanks.